Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel. And if you can believe this, this is Bigfoot class number 2020. Can you believe it? We made it this far? Holy cow. Yeah, quite a journey if I say. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I've had some ripping emails come at me. You're such a fool. Where'd you get your information? You're an idiot. On and on. Oh my gosh. And then I've had several people within the last month and a half tell me that some of the bigger names in the Bigfoot community have said, I don't know where anyone's getting this stuff about paranormal or unusual things attached with Bigfoot. I've never heard of that. That's what these people are saying. And friends, I want you to understand something. That if they've never heard of anything paranormal or unusual associated with Bigfoot, they're not doing their research. And that really disturbs me. Because if you're not doing research on a topic, where are you getting your basis for your opinion? Now, back when I was in high school, I was taught you always study history. And on this topic, Bigfoot, this is Bigfoot 101, class 20, I did a deep dive and I went way back. In my book, Bigfoot, Wild Men, and Giants, that we've talked about excessively, we have articles going all the way back to the 1600s. News articles. Now, before I get going any further, I would encourage you not to buy any of my books other than my website, which is NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com, and you can find all my books. Now, my Mission 411 books, they're asking anywhere from $75 to $150. You can buy them on my site for $24.99. So, this is the last formal class. I know all of you are going to be sad. But my goal of this class is to get you to pass the final. And any good professor of their class will set their students up for success. Pay close attention to this class, because there's going to be a lot of things I throw at you that you just may see on the final. Now let's start with one of the most famous pictures in the world. What is that, folks? If you see that picture, do you know where it's at? Do you know who took this picture? Or who took the film footage for the picture? Key points. Picture was taken at Bluff Creek, California, just north of the Hoopa Reservation. This is one frame of that film footage. So, during this several weeks of classes, well, 20 weeks, I've talked to you about some of the authors that I deeply respect and books that I would recommend you read. First one, I haven't talked about this one much, but I'm going to. It's called Bigfoot by Ann Slate and Alan Berry. And it is essentially a book about the Sierra Camp and Ron Moorhead. I was young when I first read this book, and you can see it's got a few miles on it. It's one of those books that should be in everyone's library. You should read it, because these authors went the distance trying to find what was credible and what was not credible. And they did an incredible job. Bigfoot, Ann Slate, Alan Berry. Next book. Talked about this at length in the class. Again, this is a summary for the people who may not recall and don't want to go back and watch it all. I'm gonna just summarize everything for you real quick. Raincoat Sasquatch, Rob Alley. One of the best books I've ever read on the topic. And it says Bigfoot Sasquatch records of southeast Alaska, coastal British Columbia, northwest Washington, and the Puget Sound to Yakutat leave a civilized world behind as Raincoat Sasquatch takes you out into the rain-drenched forests of the Pacific Northwest on the trail of a living, breathing species, unlike any known primate today. Now, in the book, Rob writes about a series of observations made in the islands in and around Alaska and British Columbia. You know, people have seen Bigfoot come out of the water on multiple occasions. They've seen him in the ocean water, etc., etc., etc. So any thought that water is an encumbrance to Bigfoot would not be true. In fact, it shows everyone who wants to look that Bigfoot's a great swimmer, really good swimmer, which goes against anything you read about apes and gorillas. Yeah, they can swim, but they don't like the water. They don't want to be in it. They stay away from it. Just the facts. Rob Alley, super smart guy. Somebody I've known for a long time. If you ever get a chance to go to one of his presentations, do it. Mesmerizing. Mesmerizing. He lived up in Alaska for a long time. Next book. Huge book. One of the most important ones that I've ever seen. Silent Invasion, Stan Gordon. One of the most credible, one of the most longest lasting Bigfoot researchers in the world. The Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot Casebook. I can't tell you how much about this book just rings so totally true. And Stan went to great lengths in all of his books, and I've read all of them. They're outstanding. Whatever one you pick, this man writes, you'll enjoy it. But what he documents is what a lot of researchers will never even touch. And that is the relationship between Bigfoot and otherworldly things. Stories in here about a woman who shoots a Bigfoot, it disappears in front of her. Stories in here about orbs and UFOs, and boom, a Bigfoot appears. The association between the two is strong. And Stan does not back away from it. And that's one of the things I really admire about him. A lot of researchers will absolutely walk a mile out of their way so they don't ever compromise their beliefs about something, rather than face it head on and say, I might have been wrong about this. Well, Stan's going to be at a couple of big conferences in Pennsylvania. The Kecksburg UFO Conference, Stan is one of the organizers. I encourage you to go. Kecksburg, Pennsylvania UFO Conference. Truth Denied, the Sasquatch DNA study. Well, I brought Scott into the study. He's one of my best friends. One of the smartest people I know in the Bigfoot world. And he and I have done a lot of things together. And this is what the back of the book says. It says, Scott takes you behind the scenes of the groundbreaking Sasquatch genome study. Scott was a sample contributor and worked closely with the study team. You'll get his unique perspective as you learn how the Sasquatch study came into existence, progressed, made profound discoveries, and then was attacked from both within the Bigfoot community and mainstream science. The reason? The truth was not palatable for either group and sent shockwaves throughout the research community. Scott details how these groups formed a loosely linked conspiracy of the like-minded and how this eventually coalesced into a well-organized smear campaign. Which it was. And if you notice something, and this is important when you talk about the DNA study, the cost of doing that study has dropped by 80% since we did it. And you haven't seen anybody else take that study on, have you? Nobody. Why not? How about any of the apers or the gorillas believers? If they think our study's so wrong, why didn't they do their own study? The answer is simple. They know our study's right. But the absolute premier book on the DNA study, Scott was given 100% access by all of us to write that book because we knew he'd do it right. Another book by Scott, another great book. The Identity and Origin of the Sasquatch and Other Mysterious Creatures, The Nephilim Among Us, Scott Carpenter. Bigfoot, Greys, Aliens, Dogmen, Orbs, and Other Unknown Creatures. What are they? Where do they come from, or who or what created them? Great, spellbinding book. I encourage you to read. Now, one of the best times of my life, honestly, was spending a week in the woods when I made Missing 411 The Hunted, our second documentary, with Ron Moorhead up at his camp in the Sierras, where they made the Sierra Sounds CD that we carry in our store. Yeah, the Sierra Sounds you hear in Missing 411 The Hunted, all of them are right here on that CD. Now, when I spent my time up there with Ron and cryptolinguist specialist Scott Nelson, it was just a week of us sitting around the campfire with, a video crew and sound people, but it was spellbinding. Not because anything happened, because nothing happened. But it was because we were in a setting where we could just be ourselves and talk things out. And Ron, older than me, which means he's really old, is one of the best speakers I've ever listened to. And he's a great writer. And he wrote this book called Quantum Bigfoot. Let me read it to you. It says, Ron Moorhead first encountered Bigfoot 45 years ago in the high Sierra Mountains of California. Since, he has traveled the world from British Columbia into Siberia, Nepal, and the arid deserts and high country of Peru and Bolivia. Answers not only to the unexplainably strange happenings that took place at the Sierra camp, but also to the most bizarre reports and questions in the field of hominid research. Very few researchers of his caliber are brave enough to publicly consider the hundreds of recorded encounters that include spooky action at a distance. His combined decades of experiences and tireless hours of research into the realm of quantum physics as it pertains to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and to our own spirituality has resulted in this fascinating book. Fascinating book. Great book. I encourage you all to read it. So, there you go. There's a lot of the background behind what gave me my thoughts and ideas regarding Bigfoot. Now, I wrote, years ago, I wrote two bestsellers, Tribal Bigfoot and The Hoopa Project. Tribal Bigfoot was my second book, published by Hancock House. My own mistake, having somebody else publish it, that was a mistake. It makes you feel good to have a big publisher publish your books. Yeah, so what? Well, so what? But in that book, there were two articles from the Oregonian newspaper. You will never see these anywhere. Anywhere. And when I first found them, I couldn't believe I did find them. Because it's in 180 degrees from what I learned from the ape and gorilla researchers what they're looking at in the woods. And this goes to the researchers who say they've never read anything or seen anything that's paranormal or unusual about Bigfoot. That's what they say. And again, part of that is these guys and ladies must not be doing research. Oregonian newspaper, July 16th, 1924. Big hairy Indians back of ape tail. Mountain devil's mystery grows deeper. Giants said to roam the hills. Ventriloquism is used. That's all what it says right there on the front page of the Oregonian newspaper. Well, that's pretty unusual, don't you think? That's paranormal. Read part of the what was said here, and this is important. The Indians of the Northwest have kept the existence of the Silatics a secret, partly because they know no white man would believe them, and the Indian known for his honesty and truthfulness does not like to be called a liar, and partly because the Northwestern Indian is ashamed of the Silatic tribe, said Totsky, who was a Clallam Indian at the time. The mountain devils, or gorillas, who bombarded the prospector's shack on Mount St. Helens, according to the descriptors of the miners, are none other than the Silatic tribe with whom every Indian in the Northwest is familiar, says Totsky. So they weren't gorillas. They weren't apes. They were another tribe of Indians. Well, Dave, the Silatics were last heard of by the Clallam Indians about 15 years ago, and it was believed by the present Indians that they had become extinct. The tribe made their home in the heart of the wilderness on Vancouver Island and also on the Olympic Range. As described by the Clallam Indians, the Silatics are 7 to 8 feet tall. They have hairy bodies like the bear. They are great hypnotists and kill their game with hypnotism. They also have a gift of ventriloquism, throwing their voices at great distance, and can imitate any bird in the Northwest. They have a very keen sense of smell, are great travelers, fleet of foot, and have a peculiar sense of humor. Have you ever heard that about Bigfoot? No. And why not? It's right there in the paper. One of the biggest newspapers of the time in the Pacific Northwest. How can these Bigfoot researchers say they've never heard of anything like this? Henry Napoleon of the Clallam tribe is the only Indian who has ever been invited to the home of a Silatic tribe member. It was while Napoleon was visiting relatives in British Columbia coast some 30 years ago that he met a Silatic while hunting. The giant Indian then invited him to come with him to the very heart of the wilderness on Vancouver Island. Napoleon claims that they live in a large cave. He was treated with every courtesy and told of their secrets. He claims that the giant Indians made themselves invisible by strange medicine that they rub over their bodies, and that they had great hypnotic powers and a gift of ventriloquism. Makes them invisible. Well, that's pretty paranormal, isn't it? So that was article, first one. Just last week, I was doing some research and I found this article. I've never seen it before. I've never heard anybody talk about it before. And the story is written by Wallace Smith of the New York Times, the week of August 20th, 1924. The title is Where the Nung Nungs, N-U-N-G, Nung Nungs Link Man and the Supernatural. An Indian legend accounts for the recent story from the wildlands of the Northwest of huge hairy apes that attacked a prospector's cabin and sent scores of hunters into the mountains seeking a throwback to prehistoric times. The story which I talked to you about, near Mount St. Helens, some miners were in a cabin and they were bombarded with big rocks during the night. And they thought that they were big apes or gorillas based on what they could see in the dark. The article is lengthy, and it goes on to talk about what happened at this incident. But now I'm going to tell you what the response was from the tribe. It says, the tale of the Nung Nungs. I can orate on this here subject eloquent because not only do I hole up a whole winter with the Ogalalas, but I get the Indian lore and pastimes sawed off to me by the Nisqually Joe, which is an Indian of the Squamish tribe who reforms and gives up his evil ways and gets to the top roper on the Big Spade Ranch, a very good amigo of mine. I do not warm up regardless of Indian legends. Since that time, a lost and ungenerate Sioux traded me to the secret of the lost gold mine for 2 iron pesos and a quarter of liquor. But Nisqually Joe's a different Indian. That way you can trust him, at least as far as I can throw a chuck wagon, which is farther than I trust every other buck that I can come across. Well, sir, according to the Nisqually, it tells me in them good old days, these prospectors actually seen what they claim. Only what they put down for gorillas ain't gorillas at all, but only Nung Nungs. Yes, sir, Nung Nungs is what these, although sometimes Indians also call them Tiapish or even Silatics, which is their business and whatever is the same anyway, like this for fellow Shakespearean says. For that matter, these Nung Nungs are called brothers of the noseless one, and that's where the old Shakespeare is highly carded Eden. Because when an Indian says they are his of the noseless one, he's getting personal and definite and keep it simple, the Aboriginal way. Anyway, this is a plumb natural mistake these prospectors make in the dark, being unable to read brands or ear notches at that hour. These here Nung Nungs send an average of about 8 feet high. They run as high as 10 feet, and even young ones down to 7. And they are hairy like the front end of a buffalo or a sheep herder before spring Chinook. Indians lay it down where the Nung Nungs are the result of an all-wise Providence getting a little absent-minded about. Second drink time. When changing animals into Indians, Providence falters a whole lot when the Nung Nungs' ancestors and they are left kind and betwisted in between like a lawyer's argument, which makes them a very low grade and other Indians don't send them no invitation when the tribe throws a big banquet. What makes the Nung Nungs seem resentful and ornery till you can't rest, they get in for the practical jokes to get even so low as to even an Indian blush, like the can of tomatoes. They are very talented in ways. They can talk in bird language and hold up their end of a conversation with any elk. Also, they concoct some kind of bear grease, which when rubbed on, makes them invisible to the naked eye, and very handy for parties with their intertwined ways. They can also hypnotize animals and see at night. Different article altogether, saying the same thing at about the same time. You can't ignore this, friends, especially when we know a lot more about them today than we did then. And they can smell till you wonder why. They smell very good. On a clear day, the Nisqually says that one of these Nung Nungs can sniff a geranium or other wild flower at 200 yards without no visible whatsoever, which may explain why the Nung Nungs ain't seen oftener in environments of Indian villages. The Nung Nungs are in many ways like some humans I've met, which will go often their trail and ride any time to spread some bad news. Only with a Nung Nung you can figure where he's getting revenge for being played as a lowdown by the regular Indians. Anyway, nothing pleases a Nung Nung more than to bring with some relative or stick. I don't understand. This is very hard to read. Skip over to this. The Nung Nungs got one other fetching habit. If one of them is killed or hurt, or even his feelings ruffled, a dozen Indians got to be pointed over the high divide to comfort the Nung Nung tribe. Last time this happened, the Nung Nungs got plumb hosed and hostile towards the Duwamish tribe because the Duwamish had murmured a complaint where the squaw had been stolen. The Nung Nungs dropped in to personally conduct some extemporaneous obsequies. They sure done so, and the Duwamish tribe ain't been the same since. The Nung Nungs just romped all over them. They snapped the heads off the young braves, picked them up like by their heels and throw them clear over the Douglas fir trees and ripped them apart like a hunk of trade calico. They left a whole cedar tree by the time it was token to their respect, but it didn't help the Duwamish. They were decimated. The point about all this, and there's a point. I understand you can't believe everything you read, but I've read a lot, and there's a lot that supports exactly what is stated in those news articles. Exactly what is stated in those news articles. So, what can I tell you? Ignorance is bliss. If you claim you've never read something, then you are a fool. Because when you research any topic, you research the good, the bad, and the ugly. And why? Because someday someone's going to confront you with something in that research arena, and you better be ready to talk about it. Now, the people on the gorilla, ape, gigantopithecus side, they don't want to even entertain this, even though it answers a multitude of questions that follow Bigfoot. Now, I talked to you before, and I've explained to you that this is absolutely the best research tool you could ever get. It's called the Track Record. Written by Ray Crow of Hillsboro, Oregon. He collected sighting reports and fascinating articles throughout the world. The newsletter totaled 174 and 3,000 pages, too bulky to print and distribute it, so we put it in a USB, and there's an 80-page index that I personally did on this that's fascinating. PC and Mac compatible, buy it on our site. It's called The Track Record. And that's really where I got started with my basic background, was right through that, because there were so many great articles. Now, Ray Crow, the author of that, also wrote several special newsletters that are not on that. After he sort of retired, he kept writing these special ones, kind of to keep him in the game. And this is one of the special ones you're not going to find anywhere. What the article reads is, enlarged breasts is a human trait. Why is that important? Well, it's important because this biped at Bluff Creek had large breasts. Dr. Krantz in Big Footprints, page 19, discusses them, commenting that the species should have enlarged breasts at all. It's a human trait, is also a point of contention to some critics. The red flag goes up mentioning human trait. Oddly enough, many writers in the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena seem to overlook or ignore discussion of the fact that breasts, though they have drawings that show large Asiatic and Northern American centuries with erect row and sagging Patterson breasts, the breasts are the main reason I selected humanoid model for the Patterson Bigfoot. There you go. Follow the facts, friends. Follow the facts. Now, this next one is Bigfoot, special Bigfoot newsletter issued November 95. It's number 8. Again, not in the track record. It said, cryptozoologists do not fail to quote the local tales and legends, the geographers, travelers who traditionally knew that a dragon is the keeper of a treasure hidden in the bowels of earth. What is a cryptozoologist? Well, that's somebody who studies animals that haven't been identified by science or recognized. So You got the dragon, you got the Almas Yeti, you got the Loch Ness Monster. And what do all those have in common? Never had a specimen found. Very hard to photograph. Very elusive. It's almost like they come into and out of our world at will, doesn't it? So, Bigfoot in Europe, that's the title of this one article. And this one researcher from the German-Dutch area says, European Bigfoot sightings have often been linked to UFOs, a fact that doesn't surprise me. In these reports, the anomaly researcher says man's oldest living relative, the ape, steps out of a flying saucer, the symbol of future space exploration. The past, the present, the future of man are contained in a single mythic motif. It's like a dream. Why would Europeans be open to Bigfoot coming out of a UFO? Because maybe they're not as brainwashed as the Americans are. Another important point, Russian researchers, they have never faltered in their belief that Bigfoot's human-based. Never. In this one Russian paper, Valentin Saponov wrote, a direct meeting with Bigfoot took place near the village of Vaskolovo in the Karelian Isthmus from St. Petersburg to Priorzersk. A technician walked through the forest, and despite his good knowledge of the area, he lost his bearings. Despite it being in the middle of the day, August 6th, it was very dark forest. At last, Igor found the path, and 100 meters away, he saw a human-like figure about 3 meters tall, 10 feet, covered with silver hair. The creature was sitting under a fir tree. In a moment, the creature stood up and went away. Kuzmin ran very fast. The information was received September 95. When I arrived at the place, no footprints were saved, but I found some dry furs damaged at the height of 3 meters. What I found interesting about that is when the person was in the area of a Bigfoot, even though he'd been in this area many times, kind of lost his bearings. I think that's kind of weird. And I thought it was unusual that they put it in that article. So in this story, it says, Seed Mark Boy destroys the giant. Long ago, the Pueblos, where they are now, everything was wild, and they were always on a lookout. They never made fire at night. They did all their cooking in the daytime. They went out in the daytime for firewood. Someone noticed that some people were missing, 1 or 2 every day. They wondered why. They did not know but what became of them. The old men kept watch to see if it was enemies hiding. No one could find out for years what became of the missing persons. There was an old man then that went out after firewood. He made a bundle of wood to carry on his back. He started home. He came to a place where he rested. While he was resting, he saw some kind of human walking. But he looked different, kind of naked, long hair on his body like an animal. Big hands, big muscular arms, big head, big mouth. The man got scared. This creature came up and grabbed the man. It was a giant. The giant killed him and took him to a cave. It was late. The family missed the old man. The war captain and several officers went out to look for him. They came to where he had rested. They examined the place. They saw the footprints of a giant. They wondered what it could be. They tracked him to the foot of a hill, clear to the entrance of his cave. They saw blood on the edge of the cave. They finally decided it was a giant that had killed the man. They looked around. They found where the giant had thrown the bones in the head. There were lots of bones. They did not know how to get to the giant, but they were going to try to get him some way. Everyone who could carry a weapon did. They decided to cut brush and make a big fire at the mouth of the cave and smoke him out. The giant smashed his teeth, stuck his head out. The people stood back. Then the giant came out furious. The people attacked him with bows and clubs. They could not kill him. Finally, he ran away, angry. The people kept shouting. There were arrows sticking in his body, but he didn't mind. They chased him. They followed his trail of blood. The blood is still there. You can see it on the rocks and on the earth. He went on to Cuesta. Finally, they surrounded him near Cuesta. He went into a cave and died. You can see that the red line here today. The medicine man and I helped on the last fight. This is how they were able to heal him. He cooped up like a storm. There was a noise. This was in the canyon of the Rio Colorado, Taos Canyon, 10 or 12 miles from Taos, New Mexico. That's where that story came from. Trinity Alps, Northern California, 1978, at snow camp. 2 men were rescued from a snowstorm, according to the newspaper, and told the story of Bigfoot. The creature was seen carrying a bag and ran uphill at 35 miles an hour, dropping the bag 200 yards uphill. It hung around and spied on them. The night animals would come around, 12 bears, 20 coyotes, ground squirrels, rabbits. One caught on fire and it got too close to the campfire. They saw a firebrand raised at night. Then it started to snow heavily, and the next day rod-like holes were found in the snow, and things were moved around in the camp as if they had been examined. His theory: if Bigfoot is an ET, then like Superman from a heavier planet, is much stronger, but can it maybe eat our food? Hopping was reported. Legends tell of a one-legged creature in the Pacific Northwest that hopped on 1 foot. Unipods, they were called. Never heard of that. Unipods. No, never heard of that. This is a series of short stories. Charlie talked to an Indian in 83, perhaps 90 years old. The Indian said when he was 12, he was with his dad and uncles and others. About 8 total. They were deer hunting near Mount Scott, east of Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. At night, they sat around the campfire. A terrified doe deer came flying over the fire, startling them. Right behind them, a Bigfoot came in swinging a club. The Indian said there is a Bigfoot that lives atop of Mount Scott. Just read you the stories, folks. But specifically, right near Crater Lake, I think it's kind of weird. This is a good one. A few years later, Whacker's friend Art said a Coast Guard guy had been elk hunting and took him to a place where he took photos of Bigfoot tracks a few hundred feet up a logging road. He also found a hair on a brush that a police officer sent a sample to the FBI. The FBI responded that there was no match for it. Exactly. That makes 100% sense. They were honest. This was off Youngs Bay towards the Coast Range. 18-inch tracks were found, plus a hole like one was made with a cane. It was a baby Bigfoot, only one good footprint showing. Interesting. And the last one. Peter Byrne reports, some years ago on Swift Creek Reservation, Washington, someone fishing saw 2 Bigfoot come out of the water. They shook off water like a dog and walked on. I cannot tell you how many times when I was at the Hoopa Reservation that different people told me they would see the Bigfoot come out of the Klamath River and the Trinity River regularly. A lot of the tribe believed they lived in the water because so few times they were ever seen on land. It was very rare. So, Okay, get out a pen and paper and be ready to take notes. When I was teaching a class in college, yes, I did teach a class in college. And one thing I tried to do was I tried to set up the students for success. I'm going to try to set you up for success on the final. And it's not going to be an easy one. But if you pay attention to what I'm going to tell you right now, you'll do okay. First question. Name the Bigfoot researcher that had their offices on the Dalles in Oregon. I talked about this at length. He's a brilliant man. His name was Peter Byrne. And Peter got paid to run a research project out of the Dalles. Who was one of the very first original Bigfoot researchers that owned a newspaper in British Columbia? Should be getting this one easy. John Green. Name the two people who were together at Bluff Creek One was covering the person who was taking the film footage, and the other one had a rifle. What is the name of those two people? Patterson and Gimlin. Easy. What year was that footage taken? 1967. What was Patterson and Gimlin's home state? Washington. Now here's one you might not know, but anyone who's been in Bigfoot a while will know. What was the name of the biped in that footage? They named him. Named her. Name was Patty. And Patty had an injury. Where was the injury? It was on the right thigh. Front of the right thigh. I talked about a man named Paul Freeman. And maybe a homework assignment for you is to go to YouTube after you're done here and look up the Paul Freeman footage from Washington. Very impressive. I think it's real. And what state did Paul work in? Answer is Washington. What was the name of Ray Crow's newsletter that I just showed you that I sell on my website? Come on. It's called The Track Record. Now here's a good one for you, and one I want you to remember. How many ape and gorilla bones have been found in the wilds of North America? Come on. 2 fingers. 0. And how many ape and gorilla hair have been found in the wilds of North America? 0. And what remains of a Gigantopithecus have been found in North America? None. Have giant bones ever been found in North America? Come on, folks. I wrote a book about it. Bigfoot, Wild Men, and Giants. Of course. Multiple times, giant bones have been found here. It's true. If you see a series of tracks going down, let's say, a logging road, what do you call the distance between the tracks? It's called the stride. It's important. And when you find hair from any mammal, what type of DNA do you get from that hair? Mitochondrial. And did the Bigfoot DNA study have blood and saliva samples? Yes. How many PhDs wrote the DNA white paper for our study? 4 PhDs wrote it. What's the name of the Pennsylvania researcher that I told you about early that has written great books and has documented many unusual aspects to Bigfoot? His name is Stan Gordon. Don't forget that name. Come on. What researcher recorded the Sierra Sounds? Ron Moorhead. Ron also wrote Quantum Bigfoot. Which Missing 411 movie has the Sierra Sounds in it? Now you got to get this one. You got to watch the movie. You can watch it right now on Amazon. It's called Missing 411 The Hunted. Please go watch it. True or false? I presented evidence in class that shows there's an association between Bigfoot and UFOs. True. Scott Carpenter, the author of Nephilim Lives Among Us, lives in what state? That's pretty easy. Tennessee. Now, Rob Alley wrote the book I showed you earlier, Raincoast Sasquatch. Now my question is, can Bigfoot swim? The book is almost all about that. I also talked to you about a series of Russian researchers. And I asked you, do they believe it's an ape or a gorilla? No, they believe it's human-based. Have giant bones ever been discovered in North America? Answered that earlier, yes. What should you apply to a track before you cast it? Set the stage for it. You're walking along in the dirt, and it's real fine dirt, and you see this perfect track sitting in the dirt. Well, you know, if you pour a plaster of Paris in there, it's going to deform the track. It's not going to be right. So what do? You take out your handy dandy hairspray bottle with the most thickness and stiffness in it that you can find, and you spray that track down. Wait a couple minutes for it to set and get stiff. Then apply the plaster of Paris. Key point. Have I recommended that you can get DNA from scat? No. What I told you is that DNA on a scat is on the absolute outside of the scat. As the scat moves through the intestines, it kind of scrapes the outside and grabs the DNA. Once it sits outside, the wind, the rain, the snow, all takes away from the DNA. Very hard to get DNA from a scat. We never tried it because it was so hard. Do theoretical physicists believe that portals and multi-dimensions exist? 100%. I gave you those examples. So, Rob Alley, Ron Moorhead, Scott Carpenter, Stan Gordon, Ann Slate, and Alan Berry have all written about paranormal qualities of Bigfoot. True or false? True. UFOs and Bigfoot have been associated with each other for decades. True or false? True. Russian researchers believe Almasty, or Bigfoot in their country, is human-based. True. How many times has there been a confirmed kill of a Bigfoot? Never. Never. And this piggybacks off that last one. How many bodies of a Mothman, Loch Ness Monster, dragons, or the vast majority of other cryptids ever been found? No. And there's part of your link right there. These cryptids that have never been found, there's a reason for this. Thousands of people have seen them. Some have gathered DNA, Some have gathered hair, blood, saliva. But you never get the body. And remember what Stan Gordon said in one of his stories in his books. The woman shot the Bigfoot on her porch and it disappeared right in front of her. True or false? Bigfoot is only found in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. That is false. Cryptozoology is the study of what? Animals unrecognized by science. So news articles describing a Bigfoot-type creature go back over 100 years. True or false? It's true. I wrote the book, Bigfoot, Wild Men and Giants. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. What facts exist? There's a wild ape, gorilla, or gigantopithecus living in North America. None. 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 Per linguistics specialist Scott Nelson, is there a language embedded in the Sierra Sounds recording? I talked about this, but let's go over it real quick. So this is the Sierra Sounds recording. You can buy it on our website. It's in our movie, Missing 411, The Hunted. And Ron recorded this up at his Sierra camp. And they gave it to a lab at the University of Wyoming, I believe. And they said it was outside the realm of what humans could perform. So no human did it. And Scott was a linguistics specialist. And he listened to those tapes for days and days, over and over. He said there's a language there. Now, have people ever reported Bigfoot tracks that seem to start from nothing and end in nowhere? Meaning you're walking along and all of a sudden there's a series of tracks that start, but there was no place where they started. It's just, boom, in the middle of nowhere they start. 20 feet later they end, but there's no place for the tracks to go. Has that ever been recorded? Of course it has. I told you about my and Angie's sighting of that in Colorado. What's unique about a track line of Bigfoot impressions? So you're looking at a series of tracks that Bigfoot made. What's unique about that track line? Easy answer. All of the tracks are directly in line with one another. And if you see them staggered like human tracks, forget it. True or false? Bigfoot's been reported to have superhuman strength. True. This is a good one. Name one religion that has a hairy human biped in its history. I can name you two. You should be able to name one. The Krishnas do in their history. And what about the story of Cain and Abel? Yeah. Has it ever been reported that Bigfoot can mind speak? Yes. Been reported several times, as a matter of fact. Name the prospector that was kidnapped in British Columbia and held by a Bigfoot family. We talked about this. And the prospector actually talked about the old female of the group that had breasts that seemed to sag, just like a human. The man's name was Albert Osman. And when he was interviewed by John Green, John had him sign an affidavit to the facts surrounding it. And again, when I read that Green was doing that, I thought that's brilliant, because it ensures that the story I tell is the story the witness told me. And there's too many times in the Bigfoot world where you will read about a sighting online, and if you get a chance to ever meet the witness, they'll tell you that isn't what happened to me. And everything paranormal associated with that sighting that they saw Like there was an orb in the area and then all of a sudden a Bigfoot appeared, orb won't appear in the storyline. Because some Bigfoot organizations, some of the biggest ones in the world, their leader doesn't want that in their story. They're not interested in the truth. This is a good one. What is the name of the tribe that I spent 2 years studying Bigfoot at? And where was it located? Wrote a whole book about it. The Hoopa tribe, Northern California. True or false? Unique DNA has been identified and directly linked to Bigfoot. 100% true. And what does that DNA tell us? That DNA told us that Bigfoot was half human, and the other half, according to GenBank, the largest repository of DNA in the world. By now, I think it has 360 billion base pairs. It's never happened in the history of GenBank that somebody submitted a sample and half the sample couldn't be categorized. It's never happened, but it happened with us. They had never seen the male side of that DNA. Never been categorized. Only thing that most people would say, it's outside of this world. So there's kind of your pretest, or what I would call you're getting ready to test. Now, I'm not going to say that all those questions will be on the final, but a great many of them may be. I hope that this class has opened your mind up to how you've been misled. And our own media continues to do it by making a farce and a fallacy of the topic of Bigfoot. And that's really okay with me because I'm comfortable with what I know about the topic. But it gets old when there's violent communications coming at me about what I've been told. I told you that there was a death threat made against me in Kelso, Washington at a conference where I canceled because I didn't want to put Angie there. So there's a lot of extremists that don't want this side of the story told. But you have the story now. And if you could do me a huge favor, and that is take this and share it on all your media sites. And you are armed with some of the best information out there right now. And I want you to think hard about why some of this information is not getting out. Why are people ignoring this? Why are other researchers who call themselves top of the line, the best in the world, won't even discuss it? Yeah. So that's the end of class number 20. I'll see you in a week or so. We'll have the final. And hopefully all of you will do well. And in the meantime, please watch the links that are below this screen you're looking at right here. There's comments that are put on, and my comment is usually the first one, the pinned comment at the top. And I put the links on for all the Bigfoot classes and all of the segments that I've done on various topics that have the most watch and views. It always helps me if people watch this all the way through to the end. Helps me with YouTube. So, and the more you spend time you're watching, the more time you spend watching, the better it helps me. So if you watch videos for this, for us, nonstop, it helps me even more. I've been honored to do this. There will be another series coming. Yes, there will. And we'll get this class under our belt. And the next series will be equally stimulating, I promise. But in the meantime, take care of your family. Be nice to people that you live with, the people on your block. Do something kind for someone in your neighborhood. And it's always an honor to be in front of you. Paulides out.